Great British Manufacturing Podcast, brought to you by MTD, MFG and Jefferson.
Hello and welcome to the Great British Manufacturing Podcast. On this week's very special show, we'll be talking with the Minister for Industry, Lee Rowley, who's been in the role since September 2021. And we will find out about this role, as well as what the government are doing to support the manufacturing sector. My name is Joe Reynolds, and joining me, as always, is Stuart Whitehead. Stuart, a very warm welcome.
Morning, Joe. Very much looking forward to speaking to Lee and finding out more about his portfolio. So yeah, exciting times for the industry and really pleased that Lee's joining us today.
At this moment in time, I'd like to introduce Lee Rowley, who is the Minister for Industry. Lee, welcome to the podcast.
Hi there, thanks for having me.
Oh, you're more than welcome. Just to start, we always like to learn a little bit about our guests. So to start with, can you tell us a little bit about your background, your current role and responsibilities, please?
Sure, so I'm Lee Rowley. I'm the relatively newly appointed Minister for Industry. I joined the government in late September, so I'm coming up to, I think, my fourth month in the job. And Minister for Industry covers a range of portfolios, construction, skills, steel, but also advanced manufacturing and making sure, advanced manufacturing and making sure that all of the fantastic manufacturing businesses all across the UK are supported and are helped and can continue to grow and do the fantastic work that they've both done in the past and they're doing at the moment, and we know they're capable of doing in the future.
And just secondly, just an overview of BEIS for people that don't know. You know, what is it and what does it do?
Sure. So Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. So we cover all of the major sectors within business and industry. We make sure we understand, or we try to make sure that we understand what each of those sectors are thinking, how things are going, whether things are good, bad, in the middle, so that we can feed back and be the voice of business and industry across government. We also have a huge element of work in terms of energy and net zero. Our old department we came from the energy department, and so there's a huge amount of work, as I know your listeners will know, around the net zero strategy. So we are helping to lead on government about how not just you set the targets for where you want to get to, but also how you put the spade work in to doing that, both across government and business and in our personal lives as well. And then also we try and look very long term about how we can make this country the most attractive to do business, the most attractive for foreign investment, and how we can build up a high wage, high skill economy, which is ultimately what everybody wants to see for the success of the communities, in my case, that I represent in Derbyshire and from the other 649 MPs across the country, and also to make sure we have strong, thriving manufacturing sectors which are doing what are hugely competitive in the world and are selling products both domestically and internationally.
Fantastic. Thanks for giving us that summary, Lee. Two questions in one, really. Could you please outline the government strategy for bolstering manufacturing in the UK, and also the skills shortage is really beginning to bite in the sector at the moment. If you can just also explain the support for developing the skills required by industry.
So I think in terms of where we are at the moment, obviously manufacturing, as like lots of other sectors, have a set of really quite significant and serious challenges in front of them. But hopefully we're moving through those and we can start to see the light at the end of the tunnel. So we've got some immediate challenges that we need to help and guide and support individual sectors to get through. Manufacturing is no different. We've obviously got the challenges around coronavirus. Coronavirus is a very fast-moving situation and has impacted sectors in many different ways over the course of the last 2 years. And thank you to everything that your listeners and the manufacturing industry has done all through that very changeable and often at quite short notice amendments to how we need to live and work and do business. So the first thing is COVID. The second challenge is skills, which you rightly highlighted and we'll come on to in a moment. And then we obviously have some challenges at the moment around global supply chains and the like, which need to be worked through. So there's a series of some immediate challenges which we need to ensure that we support the sector to get through as best they are able to do that. And there's so much skill in the manufacturing sector to solve problems, to find ways through issues, to be able to progress in the way that you have done so well over the course of the last few decades, and I know will continue to do in the course of the coming ones. But government is trying to assist where that's possible. So I think the immediate point is getting back to that time where, it's a little while ago now, but where we want businesses to be able to plan. We want businesses to be able to have the certainty that they need in order to make the investment decisions that they want. We want businesses just to get on with the job, selling the products, finding new markets, ensuring that they can grow, taking on more people, all of the kind of things that businesses do so well that capitalism does so well to make our societies and our communities healthier, wealthier and happier over the long term. And then on that point about the long term, what we need to work with the sector on, and what we're trying to work with the sector on, recognizing there has been a real immediate challenge which we've had to focus on collectively in the past couple of years. But there's obviously some big questions coming over the coming decades about how we make sure that the UK is well positioned to take the opportunities of the next 30 or 40 years, that we make sure that manufacturing is a very strong part of that we make sure that the UK is seen as a great place to do business and to set up shop and to grow and to build on the fantastic expertise that we already have in the sector, the academic capability and excellence that the sector works with on a daily basis. So we need to make sure we're ready for the future. And part of that is making sure that the manufacturing sector, as with other sectors, have the tools to be able to do that, talking about things like digitization and automation and how we improve productivity, et cetera, et cetera. And then also there's this big question about how at the same time as all of those big questions are dealt with and are answered, and we work with the sector on them, how we make sure that we tread more lightly on the earth through the net zero commitments that we have, and how we ensure that over time we reduce our impact on the world around us. So some really immediate challenges, which hopefully over the course of the coming weeks and months ahead, we will be able to hopefully put in the rearview mirror to some extent. And then also some very big, almost existential questions about what we're doing to make sure that we are ready for the next 30 years. So that's the overall approach, and the government wants to work with the sector to be able to support that in the future, building upon the successes that we've had in recent years and the fantastic work that the sector already does. And then you also mentioned skills, and this is a hugely important part of the discussion. We want businesses, be it in manufacturing or any other sector, to have access to a broad range of skills, and we want to make sure that not only is that possible, but also that we create the conditions where businesses want to invest in the most important part of what they do, their workforce, and how they develop skills over time to make sure that we can be the forefront of that competitive, open, international, very, very excited nation that wants to go out there and show just exactly what we're capable of doing in the world.
No, very good to hear. And how important is manufacturing in achieving the government's state levelling up and regional growth ambitions?
It's hugely important, and one of the reasons why I think I was appointed back in September was as the Minister for Industry, because my predecessor, Nadine Zahawi, had been seconded to the vaccine work, hugely important for at the time, but the government wanted to send a signal that we had to make sure we had a Minister for Industry working in a very strong team in the business department under Kwasi Kwarteng, who I know you've had on your podcast a few months ago. And my job is to both hear what sectors such as manufacturing are doing, to find out as much as I can about where those sectors want to go and about what's important to them. And that's why I've been out and about since the end of September, trying to visit as many businesses as I possibly can, talking to as many representative and trade bodies as I can. And I'm looking forward to doing more of that in the coming year. And also, it's fundamentally about myself as a minister being the voice of manufacturing across government. Government is a very big beast. It has many, many different people and many, many different elements. They're all trying to push in generally in one direction, but we need to make sure that the voice of manufacturing is heard. So it's hugely important. And on a personal level, it's really important to me. I'm a Derbyshire MP. My constituency is North East Derbyshire. It's just south of Sheffield. It's an area that has historic strength in manufacturing. And I know on a personal level as an MP for 4.5 years there, but as a resident there for most of my life, how important a strong manufacturing base is to constituencies in the North and the Midlands, and ensuring that we level up all across the country. And that's one of the things which I'm also trying to focus on as a minister, because I want to make sure that manufacturing is one of those keys to the success of areas all across the country, that we support it to do as well as it can, both domestically and internationally for the long term, because that will benefit our country as a whole at the same time.
Absolutely, and over the last 12 months, despite the pandemic, on MTD and Jefferson, we've covered a huge array of positive manufacturing investment stories, and huge investments for likes of Nissan, Siemens, Ford, Sheffield Forge Masters, the support from the MOD, and so forth. Would you mind just explaining the government's inward investment strategy? Because whatever it is, it seems to be working, Lee.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're really keen to attract inward investment into the UK. The free trade and the ability for capital to make decisions about where it wants to site itself is hugely important for the world as a whole. It's the way we make progress in humanity, but also vitally, we want to make sure that people want to come to the UK. And I was just at the Prime Minister's Global Investment Summit just before Christmas, where we announced a huge amount of investment into the UK, which demonstrates that I think that people do want to do business here. Of course, nothing's perfect. There's always things that government can do more. We always want to work with business to understand where there are challenges, and that's part of the natural dynamic of doing so. But I do think there is a sense that the UK is a good place to do business. We want to build on that over the coming years ahead. And as you say, I think there has been a real sense over the last year, despite some of the macro challenges that we've had, despite some of the questions about where the UK was heading over the last half decade or so, that we have demonstrated we want to be an open economy which attracts capital into this country, which allows people and wants to work with organisations to site their business, to come up with new ideas, to draw upon our really brilliant workforce and help to solve the problems which society want to solve, help to invest in the communities where we want to do better, and ultimately help to build the kind of manufacturing sector that we want. So I think investment from abroad is a brilliant example of where I hope we are starting to demonstrate just what a good place the UK is to do business. But at the same time, we want to work with our existing fantastic sector and all aspects of the sector, not just the ones which are on the tip of the tongue, which always get in the press, which get all of the headlines. But manufacturing is as important for the 10-man or 10-woman factory in constituencies like mine who've been beavering away for 30 years with a huge amount of knowledge and skills in a specific niche of what they do, with often exporting all across the world. I'm not shouting very loudly about it, and one of the things that I want to do is shout loudly about some of the wonderful things which happen already. They are just as important as the major big ticket items, which of course we want to celebrate and we want to highlight in terms of our cutting edge leading industries. And it's about making sure that we celebrate the whole of manufacturing and make sure that we build upon all of its skills and strengths in the future.
Yeah, Lee, it's a really good point. We talk. It's easy to talk about Rolls-Royce and some of these other larger companies, but what support are you offering British manufacturing sector as a whole, both SMEs and like the blue chip companies we've discussed?
Yeah, so I mean, we have a huge amount of work underway with some of the very big elements of manufacturing and the very big elements of industry. So we have huge strengths in terms of our car industry, and we're trying to build on that. And you will have seen, as you talked about, some of the brilliant announcements from Nissan and Stellantis, and some up and down the supply chain in regards to that. Aerospace, we have historic strength in Broughton and in Filton and Rolls-Royce in Derby, and Spirit in Scotland and Northern Ireland. We just to draw on a few, and we want to support the aerospace. We want the UK to be a leading area of aerospace R&D and technology innovation in the coming decades ahead, just like it has been over the last 30 years. We want to rebuild our shipbuilding industry. There's huge opportunities in those areas where there's an awful lot of focus often given in the media and in the discussion about them. But equally, we want to make sure that all across the country, where there are industries, elements of the sector which are just doing brilliantly and just getting on with it, that we celebrate those as well. And you will have seen, for example, some of the work that's going into Help to Grow, into the Made Smarter initiatives, into the catapults, into some of the technology centres all around the country. And I visited a couple of them, the Composite Centre and the manufacturing sector, just a few weeks ago. That is the ecosystem which we're trying to create. That if you've got an idea, that we can find ways to get that idea through the development phases into market. And equally, if you have an idea that's already through those phases and is delivering in terms of order book, in terms of employees, in terms of profit line, in terms of revenue, that we are creating the conditions that you can continue to do that for many decades ahead.
Wonderful. Your role as Minister for Industry, obviously, it's got a wider portfolio than manufacturing. It includes things like maritime, construction, defence. Could you possibly give us a brief overview of those sectors as they are at the moment and any recent notable achievements?
Yeah, so it's a really broad portfolio, but also one that I hope gives me the opportunity thematically to see all the great work that's going on across the country. So as you say, I cover maritime and shipbuilding, so there's an opportunity there to look at whether we can start to rebuild an industry which hasn't been at the forefront of necessarily of the discussion over the last decades, but I think we're keen to see how we can work with the existing industry and sector that we have and how we can continue to see its success. There's some brilliant examples of what's going on in shipbuilding already. We've talked about aerospace to some extent. Also construction. Construction is at the forefront of everything we do, and it's brilliant to see a lot of the work that's happening there. They've obviously got a hugely big job in terms of one of those larger, longer term questions about how you tread more lightly on the earth, and there's a lot of work going into construction. There's a Construct Zero Council about how we move to more lower carbon materials and lower carbon processes, so lots to do there, not least with the huge amount of additional infrastructure spending which is happening over the course of the coming years, that levelling up agenda, to work out how we do that and do it in a way which treads lightly on the earth. So as a minister, I'm up and down the country looking at, I was watching the building of HS2 just a couple of weeks ago. I was down a sewer in London just a few weeks before that, looking at Thames Tideway, one of the places in which we reduce the way in which we impact on the capital in terms of sewage. So there's a huge amount of work going on in construction. Steel, important that we create and that we retain a domestic steel industry. It's hugely important to our future success, and we're working with that hugely important industry to be able to support that, and so on and so on. There's so much of the portfolio which I'm trying to get my teeth into, but it all comes back to this basic point that the UK, often we don't say this, we're not brilliant as Brits at patting ourselves on the back, but we actually have a huge amount of things going for us at the moment. We're doing really well, even in very challenging times, and that's as a result of people going out there, working hard, doing what they think best, coming up with new ideas, employing staff, and that's exactly what we want this sector and all other sectors to do, because that's the way that we build the kind of society that we want, with a strong private sector that is delivering innovation, that is solving problems, and that is working to make our society better as a whole for the long term.
Yeah, sounds like you're particularly busy at the moment, Lee.
Yep, and will continue to be so. There's lots to celebrate, and I just want to try and make sure that I get around the industries that I represent and that I have the privilege to be able to work with, and to understand what they're thinking, because that's the important thing. Politicians are really famous for talking a lot, and I've done a lot of talking today, but when I talk, I want to talk with hopefully a little bit of knowledge and a little bit of background, and having listened to the sectors about what they are thinking and where they want to go and how they want to develop. The job of government is to create the conditions for the private sector to thrive, and we can see that that's happening in sectors like manufacturing, and we want to build on it. So keen to celebrate, but also keen to listen, and look forward to doing so in the coming months ahead in the manufacturing sector.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been great having you on, and hopefully we'll do it again soon.
That'd be brilliant. Thanks again.
You're welcome. Stuart, a fascinating interview there with you, wasn't it? A real insight into what he does on a day-to-day basis.
No, absolutely. Really informative and very enjoyable, and learned a lot, and looking forward to seeing what Lee does for industry this year.
Yeah, if you want to appear on the podcast, send us an email, podcast@mtdmfg.com. If you want to find out the latest news, obviously follow Jefferson or MTDMFG on Twitter. Go to mtdmfg.com. A big thank you for Lee Rowley for coming onto the podcast. It was great to have him on. Stuart, thank you to you. But as always, the biggest thank you goes to you at home for taking your time to listen. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Great British Manufacturing Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating and a review. You can find us on Twitter using @MTDMFG and @Jefferson_MFG.